So you can see that I've kept working on my shoe. What I've done so far is I've outlined it with a dark marker. So what you could do to add color, you could use color pencil, crayon, paint, markers, anything. So what I'm doing here though is I'm sort of showing the important parts of the shoe by going ahead and tracing around parts of them. So you notice like I stopped the line here. This line disappears behind the bow. So I'm not going to draw that edge of the shoe that I put in my original drawing. But I am going to trace the bow because that I can see that is overlapping. Then I would do this part. Then there's a line here that's behind the tongue of the shoe. The tongue of the shoe is overlapping it. So I should trace this, but I should not trace the edge of the opening. You'll notice here when I went around, I traced because this I can see. When I get here, this pencil line, it's supposed to look like it disappears behind the tongue of the shoe. So I left that untraced because it's not a line I should be emphasizing with color. So when you are adding color, as I said before, you can choose the way you do this. If you're going to use paint, like a water-based paint would work very well. So I have a paint set here. I'm cleaning out my brush, running it over the edge of the bucket twice because I'm using a watercolor brush. So let's say I decide I want the bow on the shoe to be orange. So I'm loading my paint, doing this part, staying inside that black line so that gives me a border I can stay inside of. Maybe I'll do the middle part a different color. But something I've mentioned before in a couple other assignments, maybe you don't have a lot of paint at home. Maybe that's not something you have, or maybe you're worried about running out of it and you're trying to save it. So what you could do is use other things. Like if I use this water-based marker, I can actually turn this into paint. So let's say that the tongue of the shoe here, I'm not going to sit there coloring it because a little kid, they can color. We're not little kids. We know about linear perspective and blending colors and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to put some green on there. And I'm going to put some green on this part. But since we know about blending colors, there's a little bit more that we can do with this marker. So I'm not filling in the whole thing. I'm going to go up about halfway around to the top. I'm going to use the water-based ink here as paint. So it's starting to kind of dry, so I want to work quick. But if I work quick enough, and I don't drop my brush, which you just saw me do, cleaning out my brush, and I'm just going to use a clean brush, but I'm going to touch the wet brush to the green marker here, and when I do that, it activates it. It turns it back into a liquid medium, so I can actually pull that across, and the cool thing is, it gives me like a lighter part, and it gives me a darker part, which actually makes it look much more three-dimensional. So then I'm going to touch it to this. We've talked about how when we're blending colors, you want to start out darker and fade it away to lighter. So when things have a light side and a dark side, they definitely look a lot more three-dimensional. So I'm going to finish painting my shoe. So I'll do this part. I need to add color to the trim, the decorative part there, the middle part of the bow and the heel of the shoe, the sole of it. And then I want to think about what I'm going to do in my background here. So something that I do want to show you before I move on, this is the outside of the shoe and this is the inside of the shoe. So we don't want to confuse people about what they're looking at. So I would definitely recommend, since this is facing a different way, I would recommend making it a different color. So I'm going to put some purple along here, about halfway around. And if I make that a different color, people aren't confused later when they're looking at it about, well, which way is that facing? If it's a different color, they're definitely going to know it's facing a different way. So I'm wetting the marker ink and pulling that across, and then I can use it like watercolor paint. So I would recommend, if you're doing the heel and your heel shows like this, where you have a front side and a side that goes away, I would definitely think about making those two different colors as well. All right, I look forward to seeing what you guys do.